Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Cozy Christmas Podcast. My name is Art, and today I have an author interview I'm excited to bring to you. His name is John Theo, and if you listened to last week's episode, he wrote the story Christmas in Bedford Falls. It's a piece of fan fiction, and he was so generous enough to read it and share with us. So thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed our conversation. We talk about his story. We talk about It's a Wonderful Life and Santa Claus and the history of Santa with St. Nicholas. We also, of course, discuss our favorite Christmas movies and music and traditions and memories. It's a wonderful conversation I had with John. I hope you enjoy. I have a guest today, author John Theo. He has written around 15 books with Christmas in the backdrop of several of them, as well as the fall season. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to get John on the podcast to talk about Christmas and what he writes, and a very wonderful story that he wrote that I'll be sharing either in today's episode or a previous one. So, John, welcome to the Cozy Christmas Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it, Art.
I was delighted by your story, Christmas in Bedford Falls. I can't wait to talk about that. But first, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit and who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a freelance writer. I've been writing for about 25 years, both fiction, nonfiction. I've worked for newspapers, movie reviews. I've written for numerous magazines. I've written, as you mentioned, 15 novels across genres, from middle grade mystery to fantasy to sci-fi to murder mystery. And I come to find out a few years ago, I did a retrospective. I realized Christmas is in a lot of my stories and a lot of my YouTube videos and a lot of my nonfiction. I think I'm kind of a Christmas nerd. And I realized I subscribe to a lot of Christmas podcasts, and it permeates a lot of my writing. So I taught writing at the college level for numerous years as well. As you had mentioned, It's a Wonderful Life is, I think, the greatest Christmas movie of all time, or one of the best fiction Christmas movies of all time. Taught about that in my writing class as well. I'm a big Christmas nerd, to say the least.
Well, then you are talking to the right audience here, because we are all Christmas nerds for sure. Let's talk about Christmas in Bedford Falls a little bit. Your piece of fan fiction,
Sure.
and I'll have the story already out for folks, and if you want to watch it on his YouTube channel, there will be a link for that as well. So we might talk a little bit about spoilers to the story, but I just so folks know. But what's your history with It's a Wonderful Life? You mentioned a little bit about teaching it, but when did you first find it?
Well, I've always loved the movie. I've watched it since I was a little kid, but I taught, it was screenwriting is what I've taught, the creative writing at the college level for about 5 years. Well, in New England. I've since moved. I'm born and raised in New England, and I since moved south. But the movie is so rich, and it's such an amazing movie that I just used it as a template to teach my students the craft of writing, the story arc, character, the hero's journey. It's funny because I took two quintessential movies that I would use in the writing class. It was Star Wars and It's a Wonderful Life. And you think they have nothing in common, but they're both the quintessential hero's journey. And they just are very, very rich. And It's a Wonderful Life is the type of movie you could study for years. And every time you watch it, there's something new. Like, for example, I spend a whole class just talking about, I'll give some spoilers about the movie, but like, using like water as a metaphor throughout the movie. The way Capra did it, he had like George and Harry falling through the ice at the beginning of the movie. That's one metaphor of going through the veil of life and death, and possibly going from the secular to the sacred. And then the next instance where water is in the movie, you have George and Mary dancing at the high school dance, and then they fall in the pool. And so that's kind of like an immersion, a baptism of sorts, tying those two intertwined forever. And then the next time water is used as a metaphor in the movie, you have it raining on their wedding day, which is another form of a baptism. Then you have it's snowing, and then George jumping into the river where he crosses over into the supernatural realm. And then at the very end, where he's praying to God, it starts snowing again, which snow is another form of water. So you have all these like metaphors in the movie, and that's just one little aspect of it. And so I would just teach about character arc and set up conflict resolutions and Potter and how the George's office is set. We could do a whole podcast episode just on this movie.
Yeah.
How Potter's office is set up, where it has a skull on his desk, and George has pictures of his dad, and just the way their offices are set up, the way Potter dresses, the way George dresses. So, anyways, the movie I thought was so rich, and it was just so fun to teach from, that I knew the movie front to back and studied it so much, and I just loved it so much. I'm like, I want to do a piece of fan fiction. I've never done a piece of fan fiction before, and everyone knows the characters, and it was so much fun to do because there was no pressure. It's not for money. It's for free, and everyone can enjoy it. And I wanted to take place. I wanted to find out what happened to Potter. So the story starts off with they're burying Mr. Gower, the druggist, and everyone's at the cemetery. And as they're leaving the cemetery, George sees Potter at the cemetery, and it pings something in George, like he's actually a real human. He's visiting someone at the cemetery. And then one thing leads to another, and George wants to pay it forward. And he had so many good things happen to him. He wants to show Potter kindness, and just shows up one day at Potter's office, says, you know what, I'm going to be your friend. And he's like, get out of my office, leave me alone. And then the whole story is about the redemption of Potter. But all the other characters are brought into it, all the other mannerisms, all the other things that are in the people love about the movie, the way people act, their mannerisms, I try to bring into the story to be to give honor to the original movie. So I would love to see it done with real actors or AI or something, because I just had so much fun writing it. It's just 20 minutes long, and it was just so much fun. It was just so much fun to do.
Right.
But yeah, we could do a whole podcast just on that movie. I mean, the movie, Capra did such an amazing job, the way they wrote it, what it was based on, the short story, Philip, was it Doran? I forget the guy's name, but it was based on a short story, what they did with it, how it came to be. He self-published it, like the whole, you could just talk and talk and talk about the movie. So.
Yeah. I see. I think it was last year I read the story, the movie was based on the Greatest Gift, I think.
Yeah, The Greatest Gift.
Which was a lot of fun to get back to the source material for it.
Sure.
And then to see how the movie inspired from it. But yeah, this is a movie I have some complicated history with, I guess, because I didn't really watch it until I was an adult. And I want to say 5 or 10 years ago at the most. My wife growing up, this was one of her favorite Christmas movies, to watch at Christmas time. And I never really was that interested in it because I think I remember it being on in the background at home, but I just had different other tastes, and I'm not always a fan of the old black and white films either. So that makes me a bad person, I guess. But but then when I finally sat down to watch it, rather than just seeing clips of it, I'm like, all right, first of all, I was wrong. This is a Christmas movie. And secondly, this is very good. This is a really good movie. Not just for Christmas, but
and the themes are heavy too.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty heavy themes back in 1945, and they were tackling some pretty heavy themes for a Christmas movie, and it didn't do that great when it first came out. It was really picked up momentum when it went into like syndication years later, but it was tackling some heavy stuff too.
Yeah, and I think I read that wasn't this Jimmy Stewart's first movie after World War II?
Coming back from the war, and so I think they just kept the cameras rolling when he was crying at the bar. He just like ad-lib that whole scene. And so you're wondering like how much of this is like possibly PTSD from the war or what's
Mhm.
going on. Like, and he just pulled off an amazing performance. And people
Yeah.
like maybe modern, he's my favorite actor of all time on top of this. So he's
Mhm.
like, people don't realize how many movies he's been in, but they remember that movie. And but yeah, he's an amazing actor. Amazing.
My first experience with Jimmy Stewart was in the animated film Fievel Goes West. He plays
Yes.
the old sheriff dog,
Yeah.
and I loved his voice, and I've enjoyed him as an actor as well. But
Yeah.
I don't know, I had some hang up with this movie. I can't explain it, but when I actually sat down to watch it, I'm like, oh, this is really good. I really enjoy this,
Yeah.
and which made my wife happy because now we watch it at Christmas time. And
Yeah.
I would say one of the problems, well, not problems, but one of the unresolved, perhaps, parts of this of the movie is that it seems like Potter gets away with his crime,
Yeah.
and that's what I love about your story. But also, what I loved about the movie is that okay, sometimes the bad guy, quote unquote, wins,
Yeah.
but then about the your story, I love that redemption is possible for even a Scrooge like Mr. Potter.
Right. And I wanted to close the gap with that. Like
Hmm.
in the end of the movie, George doesn't go to jail. People give him money, but you have to think in the time, people are still going to be like asking questions like, what did happen to that money? What really happened to that money? And I wanted the truth to come out without
Hmm.
giving it away, but I wanted the truth to come out. And that's the real conflict at the end. Like, what do you do with the truth once you find out?
Right.
So,
Yeah. This, even in today's times, what was it, $8,000 or something goes missing. That's not something people just ignore. you
yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, it is. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I love stories where people find redemption. The Christmas Carol is the classic example of that.
Yes.
But yeah, so this fit right into what I love to read at Christmas time, and I'm so glad you were willing to share it with us. It was really just perfect for this time of year.
Oh, thank you. I had so much fun. It was one of the, I've written probably hundreds of stories. This was one of my favorite things I've ever written because I feel like it was for everyone. It had no ulterior motives. You can't make money off it. So it's like, it's fan fiction. People do it, like I said before, people do it for Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and other series. I don't know if anyone's ever did it for this movie. And
Yeah.
I've gleaned so much from these characters. I wanted to see where they were 2 years down the line.
Kind of using that to segue to this next topic. You also wrote an article about the history of Santa,
Yeah.
and I'll link that in the show notes as well if folks want to read that. The history of Santa is so interesting. I want to share a little bit about what led you to write this article. What were some of the things you found that surprised you?
I've always been fascinated with Saint Nicholas. I think it goes back to one of my fiction stories that has Christmas is the Grotto Under the Tree. That whole story was spurned by one paragraph in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where Father Christmas shows up. Are you familiar with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Mm-hmm.
So he shows up, and he shows up not as a plump, jolly guy with giving out candy. He shows up as like this thin warrior-like guy, and he hands out weapons, not toys, to the characters in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And as a little boy, when I first heard that, I was like blown away. I'd never in my life seen Saint Nicholas or Father Christmas portrayed that way, and it just absolutely stuck with me for the rest of my life. I had never heard about it, never seen anything like that, and so that's how he came across more as like an Obi-Wan Kenobi than this jolly fat guy that you'd see in the movies in American culture today. So I've always been fascinated with the Father Christmas, the Saint Nicholas character from that story. And years later, being a Christian, I'm now fascinated with the historical figure of Saint Nicholas. And so when I first started writing articles about the history of Saint Nicholas was, probably 15 years ago. I was writing for like a newspaper, and I put out my first article on the history of St. Nicholas. So this was maybe even longer, maybe it was 20 years ago. So no one was putting out many. You see a lot of stuff on the history of St. Nicholas today,
Mm-hmm.
but 15, 20 years ago, no one was writing about it. So I started doing research then and started publishing stuff in newspapers and stuff about the history of St. Nicholas because no one knew anything about him. And a lot of kids didn't even know he was based on a true figure. So I wanted to find out the history of the actual Christian figure. And what I found out was actually really fascinating about him being a bishop who grew up the fourth century in an area of Turkey, and some of the miracles and legends surrounding him kind of were reminiscent of legends you hear today. And virtually every culture, every Western culture has some sort of Saint Nicholas type of story to go with them. Called Santa Claus in one culture, Santa, Saint Nicholas, Father Christmas in another culture, and all these Western cultures have a Father Christmas, Saint Nicholas type character that can be traced back to Nicholas of Myrna, which is like Turkey, ancient Turkey, modern day Turkey. So it was just fascinating to research this. And so one of the legends, one of the stories was about him. He grew up in a wealthy family, and he gave money away. And the legend stories was that these girls were too poor to marry off; they needed dowries, and that he snuck in their house in the middle of the night and put money in their stockings, which were drying by the chimney fireplace, so they could marry. They found it the next day, which is kind of interesting to today's stockings and stuff. So that's a legend. No one knows if it's true or not, but it was just an interesting story, an anecdote. And there's many other stories that go with it. But it wasn't until the modern era in the late 1800s that he started to morph into the Santa we know today. Clement Moore, The Night Before Christmas came out, and then Saturday Evening Post started him kind of the way you see him today. And then it was the 1930s. Coca-Cola Company did a massive marketing campaign showing a plump, jolly guy in a red suit drinking a Coca-Cola after delivering presents all night. So that's the way we know him today. And you have like 1,000 movies that have been made about him that are, primarily about the fat guy in the suit. And so I'm always trying to, whenever he shows up in any of my stories, I always try and write him more like a Gandalf, like the guy from Narnia, than you would ever see in the movies that America portrays him. I just found that always stuck with me when he showed up in that story, in The Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe. And he's like this thin warrior guy handing out swords and bows. And he's like, you're going to have to get ready for battle. And he's the serious guy. I was like, that's awesome. I was like 8 years old, and it just always stuck with me. And so when I sat down to write my fantasy novel, St. Nicholas comes into the storyline, and he's like that type of character, and he has a huge on the story. And I wanted to kind of pay an homage to that little one paragraph from the Narnia book. And that's how I've always portrayed him. I wrote him into another story of mine as well. And again, that's more of the historical Santa, but I've always portrayed him that way.
Which of your novels does he appear in? You mentioned your fantasy novel.
So I had my fantasy novel, The Grotto Under the Tree, and then I have a screenplay I was marketing for a while called Nicky and the Saint. It's basically follows the historical Saint Nicholas and then a modern boy named Nicholas, and their stories intertwined. It's kind of like the never-ending story.
Mm-hmm.
So it has got a fantastical component to it that follows the modern boy and the historical Saint Nicholas, and they do intertwine, but it's two different timelines. And it is kind of like the never-ending story, in that there is a fantastical component to it. And it's not unlike, it's really like nothing I've ever read or seen before on film. But the problem with screenplays is, even though I've written 15 books, trying to get someone to look at a screenplay, even though I've taught screenwriting and I've written for 30 years, there's so many gatekeepers. I'm at the point where I'm probably just going to possibly turn these into prose and just go in that direction, because in Hollywood and in the film industry, there's just gatekeepers upon gatekeepers upon gatekeepers. When I tell my students, when I was teaching screenwriting, I'm like, I can teach you the art, I can teach you how to do it. I can't teach you, it's who you know, not what you know. It's how to break through those walls. The best thing to do is learn how to make it yourself. because getting through the door is like, thankfully, Hollywood is now kind of fractured, and now the independent film and the technology is becoming more accessible, and it's cheaper and easier to make films and independent films. Whereas like 35, 40 years ago, if someone made the Blair Witch Project or something like that, that was like a unicorn. No one can do it. Whereas people can do it today for short money. You can make your own films. So I was telling my students, your best bet is make your own film, make a short film, and use that as your calling card to break in. Because just having a screenplay and handing it to someone is like, that's like 1 in a million shot. It's like you have to know someone. My buddy up in Massachusetts has been screenwriting for 20 years, and he's actually won a bunch of awards at some writing festivals and got represented once or twice. And to me, that is like as accomplished as anything I've ever done, just getting that far in the screenwriting world. Because it's, like I said, it's just so hard with so many get their fingers involved. Whereas with pros, it's just me handing it to either an agent or sure, and they either give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, or there's not many pros. You know what I mean? It's a lot different.
Yeah, maybe this is the cynic in me, but even if you sold a script, by the time it gets done going through all the revisions and other script writers, it could be completely different.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, there's too many people involved. Don't, and if you ever did sell something, don't hold tight to it, because it'll probably, like you said, by the time it comes full circle, it may just retain the title.
Right.
That's maybe it. And who knows what it'll look like. Even like the hairdresser will have their input, the producer,
Yeah.
the lighting guy will have their input. And who knows? You get these business people that think they're creative, and you
Yeah.
know, who knows what it is at the end. That's
Yeah.
why you see a lot of bad movies coming out of Hollywood, because
Mhm.
everyone thinks they're a writer.
Right. Right. And then you, like you said, you come get those unique ones like Blair Witch Project, that like, we've never seen this before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's all do it.
Yeah.
No,
But
no, no,
like I
no, no.
said, the technology is becoming more and more accessible to the
Yeah.
everyday guy. And I think green screen people working with green screens, and people are going to be able to start making movies out of their garage that are pretty good quality.
Hmm.
And I think you're going to start seeing more creative, better ideas. You're not going to see the same movie being made over Scooby-Doo 5 or this Gilligan's Island 4, like the same
Hmm.
movie being regurgitated coming out of Hollywood. You're going to actually see new creative ideas coming from people's garages, coming from Iowa, Nebraska, and other areas of the country that aren't Hollywood, because the technology is becoming more accessible. I don't know technology. I just know how to write. So I think I tell my students that, I tell people that I need to learn more about it. We marketing purposes, but man, if you know technology, you got a leg up. So,
And see, here we're off topic again, but
uh-huh.
but no, it's like podcasting.
Sorry.
I got started podcasting. I hardly spent any money, and I got a decent microphone to start with, and you can sound treat your kitchen table or something and
Yeah.
make it work. Yeah, that was a lifesaver back in 2020, giving me something to do, some new things to learn.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and what I want to do is to help is to tell stories and to help people tell stories, especially about Christmas time, and to share that with my audience. So, uh, I think your story is wonderful. I'm looking forward to reading some of your novels and, seeing what the little touches of Christmas here and there throughout your work. So, yeah, good stuff. Let's see, where were we even in this conversation? Okay.
I don't know. We've gone down a couple of rabbit
That's,
holes. I'm
hey,
sorry.
I do it all the time. It's not really a podcast I host if we don't get off topic. So, all right. So yeah, we're talking about Santa. Now, do you have, I usually ask, like, do you have a favorite film about Santa? Would it be something like, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or, if,
About Santa.
or Saint Nick?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have one about Santa. Um, I would like to see something come out about the historical saints. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure if there's some, I mean, seen a bunch of biographies on them and stuff. One about Santa.
There is an animated short from, I think, the 1980s, And I'm actually going to be talking about it on another podcast. Can't remember. I think it's called like the True Story of St. Nicholas or something. It was just this little 30-minute
Mm.
cartoon. I believe from Hanna-Barbera put it out. But yeah,
Okay.
I'll be talking about that on the Totally Red Christmas podcast, and that's gonna be his Christmas Eve episode. But that was I actually enjoyed it. It's not very historically accurate, but it tries. So that's really like the only film I've ever really seen about Saint Nicholas.
Yeah.
You know, usually it's a Santa Claus type film. We get, he's the jolly guy in the red suit and all that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I will say this. My favorite Christmas cartoon, Charlie Brown Christmas. Have to say that. Favorite. Music, the story, everything. Linus giving a speech, everything about that was just awesome.
The music, just the music. I'm not a musician, but it comes close to perfection, if not perfection. And just
Yeah, the Vince Guaraldi band was awesome. Great.
I love the speech Linus gives. As I remember watching
Yeah.
it as a kid, and it had this effect on me of like sober, calming me down and giving me a moment of sobriety. And all the excitement, and then it's like, oh, you know what? There's a really deeper meaning here that I believe why we're
Yes.
celebrating. And
Yes.
it was good. It was good, and it's still one of my favorite films to this day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that cartoon. My favorite.
So yeah, you kind of anticipated another question. What's your favorite Christmas movie? Maybe a full length, feature length. Well, probably. It's a Wonderful Life would rank up there for you.
Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life. And honestly, it's probably one of my favorite movies of all
Mm-hmm.
time. It's Wonderful Life, Charlie Brown Christmas. That's like my 1-2 punch for
Mm.
Christmas. Um, but we watch a lot of old films. My house will watch Miracle 34th Street. We watch It Happened on Fifth Avenue. Is it Happened on Fifth Avenue? We watch a lot of old black and white films. My wife and I are kind of old
Mm.
souls. We love old
Mm-hmm.
movies. Um, so
Yeah.
what else?
I enjoy watching Christmas Carol adaptations, and the Alistair Sim one is one of my favorites. It's
Is that the 1947 one?
51, I think. 51 or
Okay.
52, yeah. Yeah, somewhere
Okay.
in there. Yeah, well, I think it's called Scrooge, at least in the United
Okay.
States. I don't know. But yeah, Alistair Sim plays Scrooge, and I keep going back to that one like, oh, I just love it.
Yeah.
Now, how about music? Do you have a Christmas album or song that you love that just gets you in the mood every time?
I love the hymns. Obviously, Silent
Mm-hmm.
Night. Um, I've been putting together. I was in charge of Christmas Eve service at my church, and I picked all the traditional hymns. I love all the traditional Christmas hymns, but I love "Christmas Time Is Here" from Charlie Brown. I love that song. I'm such a sucker for that song, but obviously all the church old school hymns. Um, Little Drummer Boy. Do You Hear What I Hear? All the traditional ones. And then we, like when I was organizing Christmas Eve service at our church, we end on Silent Night, turn the lights down, light candles, and then exit the church that way.
Yeah, one of my favorite Christmas hymns is "In the Bleak Midwinter." Do you know that one?
I'm not sure if I
Okay,
do.
to me it's like this really
Embarrassed.
common one, and a lot of people I tell like, oh, I've never heard of that before. I'm like, really? But it is gorgeous. I'm trying to think, Christina Rossetti wrote the lyrics.
I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah, there's gorgeous piano rendition done by Doug Hammer. That his whole piano Christmas album is my all time favorite. But it's a soft and slow song. It invites contemplation. The lyrics are really inspiring. Um, it's just it's it's my favorite just to listen to
Just
meditate, or not meditate, but to unwind, relax at Christmas time. Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. I don't know it. I'm gonna have to look it up. I just wrote it
Okay.
down.
Yeah, definitely. It yeah, it's like I said, one of my favorites. And it always surprises me. Hardly anyone has ever heard about it, and I don't know. To me, it's a
No,
really common one because I listen to it all the time.
no, I'm embarrassed. I haven't. Maybe I've heard it, but I just don't know the
Yeah.
name because I play Christmas music all the time at work all year
Oh,
long. So I'm probably have heard it. I just maybe don't know the name.
sure. Yeah. That's, and I feel like there might even be two different versions of the tune. Like sometimes hymns will do that,
Yeah,
but yeah, I can email you a link to my favorite version, and you can
sure.
take a listen. But I love the music that's calm and relaxing. Obviously, with a
Yeah,
podcast like my name, gotta keep things cozy. Um, no,
yeah.
my wife and daughter, they like the more loud and boisterous Christmas songs, and we'll be dancing around the house singing into the spoon from the kitchen or something.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
usually means though we got some Christmas cookies coming our way. So
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, sugar and kids. What could possibly go wrong there, you
exactly,
know?
yeah. Well, how about any Christmas memories and traditions that are some of your favorites?
I was thinking of that when you had
Mhm.
emailed me, and I just recalled a few things that I totally forgot about. Um, when I was a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s in New England, we would always drive around and look at lights, but there were a couple things that were pegged to that era, Gen X era. We would go to the mall to see the animatronics. I don't know if this is before your time, but at the mall in New England, north of Boston, they always had animatronics there, and it was a huge deal. We would and it was like going to Disneyland at Christmas time. They had all these little cottages and the animatronics, and it stretched the entire mall, and it was like the most unbelievable thing. And then going to the other thing that is before your time is we would plan our whole week around the Christmas specials coming on TV because we didn't have cable, we didn't have VHS tapes, we didn't have anything. So the fact a Christmas special was coming on TV at night, because cartoon, I mean, you have Cartoon Network today, but when I was growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, if a cartoon came on at night, that was like, oh my gosh, it's like the best thing ever. Like, who cartoon? It was just mind blowing. And again, you don't have a VHS tape, you can't tape it. So you have to like plan your week around this, that there's going to be a Charlie Brown or a Garfield Christmas on at 8 o'clock at night. It's going to let you stay up a little late as long as you're bathed and you're in your PJs in front of the TV. So planning your week around Christmas specials was a big thing for me. Seeing that before school gets out for Christmas break, seeing the teacher bring in the massive projector usually meant we were going to see a movie, and we had like the reel to reel, and then I would have like Betamax, these massive like type of Betamax tapes that they would bring in, and the kids would just be like, "This is on. We're not going to do work. We're going to see a video today." Or we'd go to the auditorium and they'd have a reel to reel of like some Disney Christmas movie or something that the whole school would watch. And it was just like unbelievable. It was like the last day or two before break, and you would just, bouncing in your seat. And I just remember that, and obviously opening and stuff. But I just remember that was quintessential 70s, 80s, like stuff that just sticks out in my mind. I'm glad you would ping me on that in the email because I totally forgot
Yeah.
this stuff.
Well, that's what I love is going back down those memories. Yeah. Yeah, I can remember. I was in kindergarten. Was it like around 1983 or 84? Somewhere in that time frame. So a couple of years after, I remember those days where the projector would come out, the real stuff, and um, I don't know, I can't remember what we all watched, but yeah, exciting times. But yeah, Snoopy coming on, Garfield you'd mentioned, that was another. I can't miss Garfield. Um, and then oh, the other one that I really loved was the Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol. Uh, that one, that was like my first introduction to Dickens as an author, and Just beautiful story that I would still, no matter how many times I watched it as a kid, I would be trying not to cry, towards the end when you see Mickey crying, and it's like, no. Yeah. Yeah, that was a great one. Yeah. Now, do you have any foods, things like that, that are tradition for your Christmas meals or snacks?
Well, I come from a Greek family, so we would always have some Greek pastries, but it would just be pretty traditional. And now my wife, we usually there's some sort of beef or turkey or something like that. And now that we have 4 kids, and my oldest daughter's 14, and my next daughter is 11. I have to think for a minute. And both girls love to cook. So we're in the kitchen with my wife, and they're always experimenting with different things. So every year we do something a little different. They usually make some sort of like turkey or beef, and just love to cook. And so the desserts will try different things and stuff. But my mom and my grandmother growing up would always have some sort of Greek pastry, but it was always a traditional meat dish or something like that. Yeah, now every year it kind of changes here, depending on what the kids want to try, because they love to cook. Usually have some sort of cookies, though, sugar cookies.
You are blessed having a family that loves to cook.
Yes, yes.
Are you the official cookie taster then?
Yeah, and then I have 2 young boys
Okay.
too, so they just eat like it's their job. Right. All 4 of my kids, they eat like it's their job, and so like I'll try and get a cookie. My poor wife, she's like, we'll bake the cookies. She'll get 1 cookie, I'll get 1, and the kids just come in like a bunch of animals, and we're just like, what happened? Where did you put it all? And like, they're like, more. We're like, we just need. I'm like, oh my gosh, my food bill is low. Unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I don't get much anymore. It's good. It's good though. I need to keep the pounds off.
Yeah, that's what I'm being told too. Yeah, this year could be hard. I don't know. I'm gonna start looking up low fat Christmas cookies or something. That just sounds depressing.
Yeah, I know.
Oh well. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap things up here. What would you like to promote? Do you have anything coming up soon, or?
Well, I would just say out of my novels, the 4 Christmas novels that are based primarily Christmas are The Grotto Under the Tree, White Mountains False Flag, The Rucksack Kids, Wolf Hollow Christmas Mystery, and that's it. Those 3 novels are my 3 real Christmas themed focused novels out of all my other ones. Christmas might be in there a little bit, but those 3 really love Christmas. Those are the 3 for them. And each one's different. One's a fantasy, one's a kind of a conspiracy action one, and then one's a middle grade mystery. So there's a little something for.
Okay, great.
And they're all on johntheo.com or on amazon.com.
Theo.com is your website. I'll make sure that's linked. Like you said, you can find them on Amazon, everywhere books are sold. I'm sure somebody will be happy to sell you one. So, all right. Books make a good Christmas gift, folks. So that's my favorite gift. John, thank you so much for jumping on here today and just sharing a little bit about yourself, your writing, your love of Christmas. You are among Christmas nerds here, so welcome. And
thank you for having me on.
You bet. Yeah. And for everyone else, run out and get his books and read them and pass them on to others. All right. Well, with that, you take care. And if I don't talk to you again, have a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for listening today. And thank you, John, for your generosity and time that you shared with our audience. If you'd like to find out more about John and what he writes, links will be in the show notes, along with some ways that you can help support the podcast. There's also a link to our Cozy Christmas Book Club that, again, this month we are currently reading Christmas in Sugar Plum Manor by Rosanna White. I hope you get a chance to read along with us. It's a very fun and enjoyable book. I'm not usually a romance reader, but you said it at Christmas time and I'm hooked. So enjoy that story. If I haven't said already, there are some links in the show notes if you'd like to help support the podcast in a financial way. But the best thing you can do is tell your friends about us. Tell the Santa at the mall. He'd want to know. We have only about 1 week left until Thanksgiving, and then it is go time. So I hope to see you again on Monday. For right now, we are doing 2 episodes a week, and we'll see if and how I can keep up at that pace. I've got some great stories coming in December. I can't wait to read it for you. Some fun interviews. And until next time, let us remember to honor Christmas in our heart and try to keep it all the year. Have a very Merry Christmas.